this edition of the ArmorCast. Paul Say here with Ryan Dunlap, and excited about being able to spend some time with a guy that I'm super impressed with from your background and how you served our country and in our cities, and the way you're still serving, but more in a corporate environment. And so as you guys know, as you tune into the ArmorCast, we like to connect with the brightest in the market, in the business world, and specifically talk about branding and marketing as we're growing our companies. And also, obviously, that's the outward facing portion of our business, but then also the inward in-house type of stuff like culture within a business, which is super important. So, and I think that you've got a lot that you can lend on that specific note. If you check out Conflictish, which is your company, you'll see, man, he's a master of presenting his business, and your website's super cool. So, we love that. But just want to talk a little bit. But before we get going into that, you've done things all over the nation, but maybe our viewers are not familiar with you. So we'd love to have take a few minutes to just talk about your background from starting in the law enforcement arena, and even through some of the ministry avenues, and then now what you're doing today, and how that all culminates into Conflictish.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This is always super fun to sit down and talk to people you love. So this feels like vacation for me.
Yes.
So law enforcement started for me back in 2004. And I joined the Hampton Police Division. This is in Hampton, Virginia, southeastern Virginia. So if you're familiar with the Seven Cities area, we went to the same high school as Allen Iverson.
Yeah.
Michael Vick's from that part of town.
Yeah.
In fact, some of my agency fellows and I were part of the early part of that investigation. So got to do some cool stuff. But we I started law enforcement in 2004, and I got to wear a lot of different hats. I did everything from gang intelligence to I worked in the tourism district, did some special operations work, and really just kind of cut my teeth in as many different assignments as possible. And then in 2010, we relocated to the Atlanta area, and I joined the Gwinnett County Police Department. And that's really where the investigative side was cultivated for me. I almost immediately became a burglary detective, and then I went into the special victims unit as a special victims detective. So I was doing all of the terrible stuff, protecting innocents and children from predators and things of that nature. And we were doing online enforcement, and but really the part of my career that I love most and what carried over was I served as a hostage negotiator and as a crisis intervention officer. Mm-hmm. So we always would be the people that officers would call when a standard interaction was going south.
Okay. When
you needed help really navigating some difficult conflict situations, you would call in a CIT officer, and if it was a SWAT standoff, the negotiators. So
let me ask real quick. So, I guess did that call normally come from the call whenever you were doing hostage negotiation? Did that call normally come from a field officer, or did your call come from somebody else? I was just curious.
Yeah. So generally speaking, it'd be a supervisor, who's monitoring a particular situation or call and would recognize that something's going south.
Right. Okay.
And so there was a specific code that they would give to our dispatch, which is like, hey, activate the SWAT team. And we would all get pages on our bat phones, wherever you were, which was always super fun. And then you would just have 60 guys from different parts of the city racing to one location, set up a command post. And, at any given time we had 10 negotiators, and you would have probably 8 on any given call out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but typically it would come from a supervisor who was monitoring a situation.
So you'd have to work with a team of negotiators and decide who's running point type of thing?
There's always a team. Yeah. Okay. So you've got your lead negotiator, you've got your coach, you've got your scribe. Sometimes you've got 2 coaches, and then you have your intel team. And you always work in that cohort together. Now, from call to call, you might wear a different hat. So I was a scribe, I was a coach, I was a lead negotiator, I was an intel guy, and we really support each other. And really what that just comes down to is recognizing that active listening requires multiple ears. And I think I can be listening, but I'm biased. I have my own emotions happening. And so having those other ears nearby, when we take pause or when the phone's not on, we'd say, hey, so person said this.
Yeah.
Press into that.
Yeah.
Go back into this the next time they call. They hear things that we sometimes miss. So.
Active listening takes multiple ears. Very interesting. That's a good one. So I interrupted, but you were saying that you carried that over. That hostage negotiation part was maybe the part that carried over most in your career in police work?
Yeah, no doubt. And so I went on to serve as a school resource officer for a season, but ultimately left law enforcement and became a pastor. I went into ministry. And I always offer that with some context because I think most of us think about the 2 or 3 dads in the back of the sanctuary who are kind of concealed carrying. But I was working at a mega church in Atlanta with tens of thousands of members, and the security detail was massive. So it was really a corporate security outfit, what we did. And we had guys from federal, state, and local law enforcement on our security detail. And so I had a lot of opportunities to have difficult conversations with people. Mm-hmm. What I began to recognize, and this was the carryover, was that people in church and senior leaders had the same, or they exhibited the same behaviors that suspects did in an interrogation room. Mm. And when I began to recognize that, it changed the way I interacted with people. Because whether you're talking to someone in a prayer room or an interrogation room, people typically have the same issue. They're afraid of being found out. Mm-hmm. They're afraid to admit they've done things they're not proud of. They're afraid to ask for help. Mm-hmm. And I was really good at helping people develop that psychological safety to speak against themselves, to speak and act against their own self-interest, and to be honest with themselves about themselves. And so it was very helpful in church to be able to help people who are navigating spiritual challenges, right? Yeah. So I left that assignment. While this was happening, I was serving as a reserve deputy sheriff. So I'm still in law enforcement, but I'm doing it on the weekends and things of that nature.
So a reserve deputy sheriff is just kind of part-time?
It's part-time for no pay. It is absolutely a volunteer capacity. So I maintain my law enforcement certification. And I would say I'd pray for people on Sunday and kick doors in on Monday.
Yeah, baby.
You know, so
when you're in a reserve, you're still protected by all the things as a full service officer. You're just volunteer
when I'm on duty.
Yeah.
As long as I'm on duty. So still same uniform, same gun, same arrest powers and things of that nature. But it's purely voluntary.
Gotcha.
So I did that until 2018, and then I fully stepped out of law enforcement. But after that, I was given an opportunity to come up to Chattanooga, and I was asked to serve as the executive director of an anti-human trafficking organization and to expand that into the state. And that's really what led me to Tennessee. And stepped into that for about a year, got to travel, meet some very important people and, high-ranking positions in government, and but ultimately decided that I wanted to start my own business. And this is something that had been marinating in me for a long time, because throughout all of my different career transitions over the last 20 years, as an executive leader especially, was leadership development, communication, and helping people solve critical problems, whether it was in law enforcement or in business. And I was doing this on the side and decided I wanted to do it full time. So after my first year with the anti-trafficking organization, I decided to hang a shingle out, launch my firm, Conflictish, and haven't looked back yet.
Man, that's so cool. I love the way that, in my opinion, God takes us from, season to season.
Yeah.
And in those seasons, we don't always fully understand what he's putting in our tool bag.
Yeah.
But then we show up at a new job site, and wow, they're all there. All the tools that we can reach for, and it's like, man, I wouldn't have been able to. You can't get that through the classroom at university, right?
Right.
The things that you're doing now, helping business owners, you couldn't. I mean, there's, I'm sure, lots of literature you could read, and scholastic learning about situations, but as far as really understanding, even just the thing you said, I mean, as far as hitting on again, active listening takes multiple ears. I mean, you can, I get that, and that hit me today, and that's something I'm going to take with me, but not quite the way that you get it, because you've been in an environment where you were in that kind of high stakes role and realizing there's somebody or multiple people's lives in the balance, and you didn't hear it, but your teammate did. Mm-hmm. And that's why you need each other,
Yeah, and I think what's really cool about about all of that is recognizing that, yeah, I was negotiating with people when lives were in a balance, but for a lot of people, when it comes to conflict or whatever they're navigating, it feels just as intense. Yeah. It feels like the stakes are just as high. And so the skill of not invalidating someone else's challenge, right? You've got to make a business decision. You've got to fire an employee, or you've got to hire between these two, or you've got to, there's, M&A opportunities coming up and we're not sure if we should sell or if we should merge and what that looks. It's conflict that still feels like imminent danger. Yeah. And so the same things that I was experiencing, operating out of my limbic brain instead of my prefrontal cortex. Yeah, we can get super complex, but at the end of the day, man, it's about understanding human behavior and a person's need for psychological safety, helping them regulate their emotions so that they can make a critical decision. Yeah. And that's really what I love about law enforcement. And what I get to do is bring that training, that knowledge to other people in a different container. Yep. Because, like you said, you can read the books. There's a lot of academics behind it. I've done the research and I consider myself a practitioner scholar. Yeah. I love to do that part. But what I recognize is it's not always relevant in the workspace. So I use that knowledge to inform what I do, but the container that I put it in is something that anyone is able to access, pull tools from, and then deploy in whatever their day-to-day circumstances are.
Yeah. So you've got these different life, opportunities that have prepared you for, launching out into business for yourself. And that is a scary, situation sometimes, lots of, questions about whether it's going to work out and whether you've got what it takes and all kinds of things. But one of the things that you have to do whenever you start your own thing, as opposed to joining something that's already kind of alive, you've got to bring life to something. And so let's talk about, some of those things as far as what you found to be the most effective way to build your brand. For Conflictish and who you are and what you're bringing to the table for your clients. We've got listeners that are going to be, in all different industries, but those, we found that lots of branding concepts, they're successful for all those different industries. Yeah. What are some of the things that you found have been most effective in creating your brand for your company?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I have to go back. So when I first created this company, it was actually about 7 years ago. And I had an LLC. It was called Real Tact Leadership, LLC. And that was because what I still do today, everything that I've done is based off of this framework that I've created for what I call conflict competence. So Real Tact is an acrostic for rapport, engagement, authenticity, listening, trajectory, attitude, culture, and timing. So I was operating as Real Tact Leadership on the side. It was my side hustle for a long time. And I got to a point where I felt like the brand didn't fit me, right? And I didn't know, it felt too buttoned up. It felt unapproachable. It felt very corporate and stagnant.
So it could have been an okay brand. But the fact is, it didn't fit you.
Yeah, it was great. It had traction. It made sense for what I was doing. Just like Conflictish, it had brand colors, brand identity, like all of that stuff was well thought out. But it wasn't me. And so what I recognized was that I was doing a very poor job of representing the brand. I didn't have what it took to really push that thing forward because I didn't even feel like I connected with it. So Conflictish was an idea that literally came together on a napkin at a local coffee shop. And I hate that because you hear people say it all the time, but I was contemplating if I was going to leave work, leave my executive role. And, but I was confronted with this truth about my business that I didn't love. And so I said, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to absolutely do? I just want to help people deal with all this ish, right? So I was thinking a 4-letter word, but I try to refrain. So, right. So I was like, I wrote down ish. And I said, well, what kind of ish am I thinking about here? When I say I want to help people deal with their ish. And what I thought I was going to write down was like business problems, employee attrition challenges, go down the list. But what came out were these 2-word phrases like sluggish performance, tarnished rapport, hellish attitude, diminished productivity. employees who vanish, staff skirmishes, like all of these ish words. And I was like, that's the ish I want to deal with. So when I recognized I had something that sounded good to me, I reality tested it that day with my napkin. I went to a networking event in town, and I said, well, we'll see what happens. I had no website, no nothing. Yeah. I went out and I met with a bunch of people. When they asked me, what do you do? I told people I'm a conflict strategist. I'm the founder of a company called Conflictish. We help leaders and teams get their ish together. I wanted to see what happened. And every time I said that, people were like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I resonate with that. So the first thing that I had with zero invested was I got social proof. Mm-hmm. I got social proof from people who said, hey, I resonate with that. But then I had to build it out. And for that, I needed help. So I contacted my sister, who is a phenomenal brand strategist. And I started putting some things together, and she ripped it apart, like the good sister she is. And
hey, if you don't have a sister, try to go find one.
Yeah.
I have one, and she's awesome too.
Yeah. So really for me, she was the one that helped me hone in what brand strategy I needed to come up with. And it wasn't as elaborate as you might think. I wanted this to be a brand that you could reach out and touch. I wanted it to be different than any other conflict strategy or conflict resolution firm that's currently on the market, which is very corporate. It's buttoned up. It feels very, this. And when people call, they've got big problems, and so they're nervous too. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted was an opportunity for people to feel less tense when seeking help for conflict. And so she gave me the words. She was like, you exist to make conflict less taboo. And I was like, yeah. So we archetyped the ideal customer, my ideal client, and they fell into a couple of different categories. It was Scrooge, Will Smith, and Steve Urkel. And these were archetypes of corporate leaders that we were trying to reach in various stages of growth. So we had the old stale, been here doing it for a long time, 55 plus, typically white male executive, who you can't tell them anything. And they have to go through 3 phases of ghost stories before they realize that everything that they've done to tear their companies apart is their fault. Our Will Smiths were the young, up-and-coming, mid-career executive who had all of the energy and the motivation to do it, but didn't deal with emotions well. And under pressure, could find themselves on stage in front of a national audience slapping somebody in the face, right?
Yeah, that never happens.
Yeah, never happens. And then the Steve Urkels were those who were young, up and coming careers in their career. Maybe they weren't yet in leadership, or they were really early. They had all of the knowledge, but none of the presence, right? And so they needed the courage and the competence to really kind of improve how they led themselves and others through conflict. And so those were the 3 big umbrellas we wanted to reach. And I recognize that all 3 of those demographics are met on social media. And so my marketing strategy was purely to pump high-value insights every day, free nuggets of insights on conflict strategy via social media to reach that audience with no ask, no call to action, no next step, just high-value content for you, where you're at, and if it works, great. Right. So we're building the tool belt in a very public place, in a public forum. And that's how we started. And man, that took off.
So tell me a little bit about that. Cause obviously you build the brand, and I think that was super valuable information. Like, you can have a great brand, but do you connect with your brand? Is it you? So you need to create that, but then you have to get your brand out, mm-hmm. which is the marketing side. And you just said, what you focused on was social media, all the different potential outlets to just provide some value on the front end. Yeah. And so, what, how long were these video clips? Or how long were they? How did you decide what content to put out there initially? You've already mentioned that you didn't. It wasn't sales pitchy. It wasn't, hey, if you like this, then call us for a free, consultation, right, or anything like that. So what did that look like to kind of create that type of social media start?
So early on, it didn't look good.
But you did something, right?
Yeah, I did something. And, you know, what I was not afraid to do was to get it wrong. So I treated it almost like dating, right? I had to ask my brand questions and see what they liked and see what they didn't like, and then remember the things that worked for them. And so early on, I was doing videos with no real direction. I was just trying to come up with things that I thought I wanted someone to tell me when I was navigating conflict. But it wasn't very deep. It was a little gimmicky, and it was disorganized. You know, I was just putting stuff out. So I had maybe 400 followers or something on Instagram. No TikTok, no YouTube, no nothing. So one day I said, okay, I need a strategy to try to make these relevant. So I started kind of going back through years of leadership development and actual training that I had with people. And I had this idea, and I said, man, what if I just did a video called like a conflict tip from a former hostage negotiator? Like that's the, you know, the attention grabbing line. And then I would give them a real solid insight that they couldn't read in a book somewhere. Right. So I had to make it up. So I did this video called a conflict tip from a former hostage negotiator. And the tip was, don't wrestle with bears. Now, bears was an acrostic that I had created on my own. And it stood for people who were belligerent, emotional, angry, aggressive, and revenge seeking. Right. This real top tier of high conflict personalities. And I just shared a quick insight that said, you know, as a negotiator, when we recognize that we're wrestling with a bear, we stop, right? Another acrostic I came up with, we give them space, time, and an opportunity to be heard. So these things just kind of came out.
Yeah.
I shared it. I put it on Instagram, and it got very little traction.
Huh.
You know, I was like, I
liked it.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have any reach. Yeah. Right. And so for the people who were connected, they were like, man, that's really, really great. And then I had a local pastor who said, hey man, your videos are actually getting really good. They're really good. I know you've got like small audience, but you really should think about getting on TikTok. And I was like, TikTok, man. And you got to keep in mind, my frame of mind for this is I was a former special victims detective. I did investigations via social media all the time for exploitation. I was running an anti-human trafficking organization that deployed artificial intelligence technology across the webs to stop people from being trafficked. So my understanding of social media was not good, yeah. Right? Or my experience with social media was not good. So I didn't want to get all the way in it. And we all have these preconceived notions about social media.
Yep. I have some too, you know, that kept me from wanting to dive in.
Yeah.
Because I've had friends that go down the dark hole,
yep.
you know, and then it's like, you know, their life's falling apart, and it's because they had the ability to connect with some, you know, parts of our culture that they couldn't have done if they weren't just a member or of a particular social media platform.
That's right.
So then we're like, you know, let's not do that. That's too dangerous. But that's that happens. It does. But it happens whenever you're not disciplined or not mature, because you can really go anywhere for that stuff.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You know, you can avoid social media, but you'll find it if that's what you're really looking for. It's like water; it'll find its way through the cracks.
Yeah.
So, so I decided I'm going to try this TikTok thing, and really found a ton of value on TikTok from other content creators, and I was like, wow, this is really good. So I put some of the older videos, and I put that same bear video on TikTok. And I had beat myself up to get like 150 followers on TikTok. And then I went to bed one night, and I woke up the next morning, and I picked up my phone to read an email, and had this notification that said, you have 1,500 new followers. And I was just like, what?
Something happened wrong.
Why? It's a mistake. Like, those are my first words. I said, my phone's jacking up, you know. And I opened the app, and sure enough, I had like, you know, 1,700 or something followers on my TikTok page. And I was like,
so the platform matters.
Yeah. And I was like, well, what is this? And so I put it down. I went to go grab a cup of coffee, and I was like, I told my wife, I said, man, I got like 1,700 followers last night. And she says, why? I said, well, they liked that bear video. And so I picked the phone back up, and it said I had 3,000 followers. I had gained like 1,300 followers from the time I went to the kitchen to grab a coffee.
Yeah.
And I was like, uh-oh. And that day I went from 150 followers to about 10,000 in the span of like 6 hours. It was mind blowing. And I was like, all right, TikTok it is. I was like, forget the Instagram stuff. So I started pumping stuff on a TikTok, and then something interesting happened. That same video that popped on TikTok, about a week later, it picked up on Instagram. And my TikTok channel had gotten up to about 10,000, and then it stalled out. But then Instagram was doing this really, really gradual rise, and it went to 10, and then 15, and then 20,000, and then 50,000, and then 80,000, and then 100,000. And I remember the day we broke 100,000 on Instagram, I was going to do like a celebration kind of video. Hey, thanks for rocking with me. And I grabbed my phone. I was just doing stuff on my iPhone to do a little thank you video. And by the time I grabbed the phone, I was already at 103. And I was like, I can't even keep up. At this point, yeah. I'll just sit back. So, TikTok is now up to, I think, 22,000 or something like that, and Instagram is 128 or 129,000. But here's the thing, the numbers don't matter, because a lot of people have a lot of followers, and what really caused my content to stand out is that it has incredibly high engagement. People can see what you're doing and not share it or not comment on it or not like it. And so some people are only counting views. I don't count anything. What I'm counting is the amount of people who are reaching out and saying, I want you as my coach. Our company needs you to come in and coach and train us, purely because of 90-second video clips that I was putting out on the internet based on insights and wins that I had experienced or walked other people through over the course of my executive career. Yeah. And I think the real lesson for me was recognizing the things that I took for granted, the nuggets of wisdom and the knowledge that I took for granted, was sometimes the first time and the only time any other people had heard anything like that before. It was the container. Right? There's so many people out there sharing solid wisdom, but we negate we always say it's not what you say, but how you say it. And I said, that's not true at all. It's not all. It is true, but it's not all. It's what you say, it's how you say it, but it's who's saying it. And if you can't connect with the messenger, then it doesn't really matter what the message is. And so what I recognize is that there is a part of the market who wants to hear what I'm saying the way I'm saying it from someone like me. The cool, calm, collected. And I think being a hostage negotiator makes it more appealing. Sure. But I found a lane and I stood into it, man. And so I did not have a marketing strategy when I started. My marketing strategy found me. And just by doing the videos, I've had client calls with folks in Canada, Panama, Trinidad, Australia, all across the United States and Europe. This morning, I got a message from someone that says, hey, I set up a client call with you. I'm in the UK. Can't wait to connect. So it's purely by strength of the internet, and because of the service that I provide allows me to be able to serve the demographic across the world. I've seen immeasurable growth.
Yeah, that's cool. And from the very start, it was like, hey, you said, how did you get this thing started the wrong way?
Yeah.
But you did something, right? Yeah. So you got to get over that fear, the precipice, you got to cross it and be willing to say, you know what, here it goes. I mean, yeah, I'm with you. There's stuff that I look back at, and we're nowhere near the place really that you are with your social media presence, I don't think, but early on, it's like Robert, my digital marketing guy here in the room with us. He's like, all right. And he's like, iPhone in the face, like, talk about this. And it's like, okay. And was it great? No, it was raw and it was real and it was a start, and now we got a cool setup and, it's like, wow, this place rocks, which is nice, but it doesn't happen. You don't get here or where you are without the first little iPhone in your face, blah, 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 just getting out there and being brave.
Yeah, and it's not even just about the videos. It's anything. It's print media. It's whatever you're putting out there into the market. Give yourself grace on the first half of it, because I was having this call with a friend of mine yesterday that's getting ready to launch their podcast, and she was really, really struggling with preparing herself for this thing. Her words were, she says, I've finally put a stake in the ground and now I have to present this thing to other people and I'm getting nervous. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to share. And I said, just share your story. Share your story. Don't worry about trying to sell the business or share the podcast. Why did you start this thing? put it out there and don't be afraid to get it wrong, and see what other people say, because your target audience is going to tell you. The first time I went to a coffee shop here in Chattanooga and someone said, "Hey, you're the ish guy." I said, "What?" That was kind of scary. Like, it was cool, but it was also like, uh-oh. He says, "Man, I recognize your face. I recognize your logo. I've got a sticker from my company on the back of my computer." And he says, "I follow you on LinkedIn. I've seen some of your content. It's really, really great stuff. It resonates with me." Yeah. And there's a book called Crisis Ready that I read by a young lady by the name of Melissa Agnes. And I'm going to butcher this, but she provides a formula for what makes a crisis go viral, or a situation. When she's talking crisis, we're thinking like scandal, corporate scandal. And she just offers these nuggets. It's like, it has to be easily shareable. It has to be immediately, like, it has to form a connection with people. It has to resonate with people. And it has to be like a critical piece of information. Like, it has to be relevant to something that kind of presses a button in people. So you can have a situation where, or you can do marketing in the space that you're talking about something great, but you're sharing it in a way that's not easily distributed. Or you've got something that can be easily distributed, like social media, but it's not resonating with people, right? Or it resonates with people and it is on a platform that's easily shareable, but what you're saying doesn't really resonate. It's not impactful enough. It's not big enough worth, so all of those different things really matter. It needs to be a very important message on a platform or medium that's easily shared, and it needs to resonate with people. And when you can kind of put all three of those things together, you get this opportunity for your message to go from 50 ears to, 5,000 or more.
Yeah. Man, some really cool stuff about branding and marketing. Thank you for sharing that. I want to kind of curb the conversation a little bit towards company culture. Like, to me, it's one of my deepest desires for my company is to create a culture where people are proud of doing what they're doing. They feel like they're safe there to do it. They feel like they can try new things and become better, where their desire and kind of the push without being pushy to grow personally and professionally every day, and then ultimately to have a family feel. That's not like the same kind of family feel where you want to give each other a noogie constantly. It's okay. Like, that's okay. But then we got to get on to work, right? And we also need to create like that SWAT team feel, whether it's real or not, or the SEAL team feel, where it's like, man, we're tough as nails. We can get through anything together. Like, creating that type of culture that has that, because I think that when we have that culture, it spills out over onto our customer, and they're like, man, those guys, that's a cool unit right there, and they make mistakes, but they fix it. They own their stuff, and they love each other, and they look out for each other, and they looked out for my house in our case as a remodeling company, or they looked out for my family and our protection. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the key things that you found are really instrumental in building a company culture.
Yeah. Trust. That is the key. It's trust. When you talk about SWAT team culture and that continuity, that brotherhood, and that camaraderie, it starts from a place of trust. There were some guys on our team who, and I'm talking about the tactical side. So I was trained as a tactical operator before I became a negotiator, but I didn't serve as a tactical operator. On the tax side, you have to be proficient. You have to be able to carry your own weight, right? I need to know that you're not going to shoot me in the back when we're in a stack, kicking in a door, doing close quarter battles or something like that, right? Yeah. So all of that matters. I need to know that you can put lead on target and that your grouping's tight. I need to know you've got trigger discipline. But that competency doesn't matter if I don't trust you, right? And I would rather have somebody on the team, and you see this a lot, I would rather have somebody on the team that I trusted, who maybe wasn't an ace, right? They're not the best, most proficient tactical operator, but they've got a good head on their shoulders, and I trust them. I'd rather have that person on my team than the most proficient. And what happens in businesses is we reward proficiency. We reward competency. And so what happens is on the front end, we hire people because of competency. People come in the door because of their resume, and we're looking and what's your certifications, what's your training, what's your experience in the marketplace, what's your education maybe, what all that stuff. We stack it up and we say, man, this person is competent. And we'll do a 30-minute interview, but we don't actually figure out who that person is. We'll make a decision because it feels good based on competency. They get in the door, and what most leaders don't recognize is they no longer judge people because of their competency. Now it's 100% chemistry. How do you fit in to this company? How do you fit into our team dynamic? Do I trust you, right? Trust determines whether or not we delegate well or micromanage. Trust determines whether or not we allow people to innovate and bring new ideas to the forefront. Trust determines how we work together within so if without trust, you don't get synergy. And so your company values and culture, regardless of what the words are on the wall, right? So for me, the number one thing that we say is we value relationships here. The number one thing, we value relationships. And the reason is it's strategic. There's something called the skills approach to leadership. Now we're going to get a little theoretical for a second. The skills approach to leadership posits that at the lowest level of leadership, you have to be technically competent. You have to really know how to do your job. And the other three dimensions, so it's technical, human, and conceptual skills. Those are the three buckets. At the lowest level of leadership, you have to be technically competent, but your human and conceptual skills, they could be relatively low because you're the guy or gal doing the thing.
Yeah.
That technical person almost always gets promoted. Somebody at the top says, oh, we see the hard work you're doing. We want to give you a bump. We want to give you a promotion. Well, at the next level, your technical proficiency is no longer as necessary because now you have a team of technically proficient people.
Yeah.
So you need to know how to direct, redirect, and replicate. But you also now need to know how to get people on the same page to move towards a common goal. So now your human skill, that has to go up. And you also now have to be able to take ideas from the top and distribute those ideas to the bottom, right? Your middle management now in such a way that generates buy-in and that there's momentum, right? So your human and conceptual skills have to go up. At the highest level of a company, you don't even need technical competency, right? But your human and conceptual skills have to go through the roof. Your ability to establish rapport, your ability to generate psychological safety, your ability to read people and to connect other people to other people, your ability to bring ideas to the forefront, right? So from a value standpoint, what happens is we tend to front load our companies with values that are purely based on results and metrics, but not people. And what happens is the companies define value in a way that people don't. Companies define value based on outputs, based on outcomes, results. Yeah. People define value based on outputs, what we put into it, what you put into me, what it feels like as we get to the place we're going. So I did this exercise for a company. I was hired to go out and help them establish value for themselves. And I asked them on the front end, how do you feel value? And everybody gave stereotypical answers, pay raise, promotional opportunities, upward advancement, bonuses, things like that. We did an exercise for about an hour. We asked some questions. We did some back and forth. And then I asked them the same question again at the end. How do you define value? How do you receive value? None of the answers were extrinsic. They were all intrinsic. I want to know that I matter. I want to know that my work matters. I want to know that I'm trusted. I want to know that I'm valued here. It was all intrinsic. So company culture requires trust. Trust starts at the top. If you don't know how to cultivate it, then you're not going to be able to breathe that across the team. And when you understand the dynamics of leader membership exchange theory and dyadic relationships from top to bottom, what you discover is that people who have trust will go further, stay longer, and do more than anybody else in your company because of trust, right? So if you don't have that component, right, and you've put this mask on where you just kind of do the thing and you say, hey guys, we're a family here and go out and get them, people can read through that.
Right.
That's not trust. Okay. So real trust requires real relationships, and real relationships will generate real results. Focus on the outputs and the outcomes will come. What are you putting into your people? What are you putting in those relationships? And the results will follow.
Yeah, that's good. Good stuff. We're kind of getting closer to running out of time. So I want to talk about just a couple more things. In your role right now, which, conflict management specialist, I'll call it. What is something that is maybe a little bit of a misconception about your role or what you do or what that means, specialist, conflict management specialist, that you passionately disagree with? Like the thing that maybe when I'm looking, I've got an issue in my company and I come across and I just see, Ryan Dunlap, conflict management specialist. The first thing I'm like, but you like, dude, you are so wrong. Just that thing that you're like, that's not me. That's not what I'm doing. What is that?
Yeah. So it's two things. One is I don't believe there's any such thing as healthy conflict. Right. And so people call all the time to say, oh man, as a leader, I embrace this healthy conflict for my organization, but my team, they're really conflict averse. I fundamentally disagree that there's anything close to healthy conflict. Conflict is neutral. It always is. How we navigate conflict can be positive or negative, but conflict itself is neutral, right? So if you're healthy and you have healthy conflict practices, you will experience healthy conflict. If you are unhealthy and you have unhealthy practices, you will experience unhealthy conflict. There's no reason to be afraid of conflict. What we really need to be focusing on is my number 2 issue, which is you can't resolve conflict with other people until you learn how to resolve it within yourself. And people like to call conflict management specialists to help them solve problems with other people. And they're always kind of taken aback when I tell them, you have to start with you first. You have to understand your biases, your heuristics, your tendencies and tolerances and your filters that influence circumstances or people toward conflict, right? Yeah. And so I call them issues, all the ish that you do that contributes to conflict, tension, and misunderstanding. What kind of issues are you dealing with? And most people don't want to get honest with themselves about themselves. It's too easy to point a finger and say, well, this person's not doing this thing or they're doing this thing the way they shouldn't be doing it. But you can't call me to come and solve your problem. I can't solve your problem for you. All I can do is give you the tools to identify sources of conflict within yourself and within your organization. I can coach you towards patience. I can coach you towards diligence. I can coach you towards compassion. I can coach you towards management, conflict management. Mm-hmm. But resolving conflict is a two-way street. It requires you and the other person. And because I can't control what the other person does, and that means I can't focus on my outcome. I have to focus on the output. So I coach my clients to 110% focus on what they're putting into that conflict conversation. How are you showing up into this moment or these moments? What does your conflict presence look like? I think that's the biggest thing for me is that healthy conflict paradigm that I really don't agree with, and this idea that somebody else can come in and solve your problems for you. It doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. As negotiators, we weren't really solving problems, not long term. I couldn't come in for 2-3 hours on a telephone and solve someone's lifetime of problems. Yeah. But I had tools that over time could coach them to make positive decisions in their own life. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's what I get to do now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. Some really, really valuable insights on marketing, brand development, culture, and just a understanding of what you're doing in the market. And I mean global market, and I love how, maybe when you started your company, you're thinking, well, the Tri-Cities area would be great, Atlanta, Knoxville, Nashville, being here in the hub of Chattanooga. And now you're talking about, Thailand and the UK and, all that kind of stuff. So how cool is that,
Yeah,
we look forward to continuing to follow you and what you're doing. And if you are listening in today and you want to connect with Ryan and what he's doing with Conflictish, we'll have some information that you can link in on at the bottom of our podcast. But tell us what's the easiest way to connect with you if somebody's like, man, that sounds exactly what I need to look into.
Yeah, we're Conflictish everywhere. So it's Conflict ISH, one word. It's on Instagram, the website, TikTok, Facebook. So every single one of those links has a road back to me. And we set up discovery calls for folks all the time if they want to just kind of call in and say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with, and I'd like to know if you can help. I'd love to connect with anybody who feels like they could learn from a conflict strategist.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining in, and we look forward to seeing you next time.